Okay. All right. Thank you and welcome everyone. This is Anjuman Syed. I'm a quality analyst at ThoughtWorks, as Balwinder has given my intro as being the scared one and hopefully not the scary one. Pranesh.
Yeah.
Hey, hi guys, myself Pranesh. So I'm also working as a quality analyst at ThoughtWorks.
Yeah, I
I
think
will be pairing with Anjuman for this talk.
Yeah. Since we've already had a very brief round, I'll move on. So what's the fuss already about? What we're going to do today in our talk is we'll be sharing some insights from data projects Pranesh and I have worked on as quality analysts. And we will also try and explore some aspects of agile framework that we were trying to fit in for these data projects. And we'll do so by perhaps presenting the problem statement that we were dealing with in the form of a case study. And on the way, we will also touch upon the different QA activities that we had taken up as part of those data projects that particularly were different when compared to the non-data projects we've been on. So to start with the problem statement, meet our customer, Sally. She is a price analyst and works for an international wholesale retailer. And price analyst, in her role, she usually has to come up with pricing strategies for the products that she's responsible for. And she also has to take into account a lot of calculations and manual data analysis and price analysis of these products, even from other competitors in the market, and come up with good price recommendations, which can also tie back to the business goals of her company. Her responsibilities usually included reviewing all the historical prices on the products to analyze their performance and analyze prices with respect to the company strategy, and then suggesting new prices after analyzing the competitor data. Sometimes she would also manually sort all this data and validate some of her assumptions. She would go on to derive some mathematical outcomes also for every price change that might have happened on that product in the past years. And sometimes also filter a lot of this data and generate reports for herself to review and also for her immediate supervisors to pass on to. What her ask really was from us was that she wanted to get all of these price recommendations generated automatically. And she wanted these prices recommended in a way that they optimize profit for those products. And she wanted to be able to publish these prices in a way that she can consume them and review them, and also pass on to the stores that would be using these prices to now put up on the products in their stores. One of the key expectations from Sally was that when these new prices are recommended, the customers should continue to buy those products on the same prices, and the demand should not really go down for them. Apart from this, she also wanted to periodically review all the recommended prices and be able to approve or not approve or take strategic decisions moving forward. So this was what Sally's problem statement looked like. And if this were to be translated into the business objective, it was mostly that the business wanted to increase its profitability and price its products more intelligently based on all the external factors. The vision statement that the company shared was to be able to provide the right price to the right customer at the right time and the right place. By right place, what I'm referring over here is the place from where the customers would buy these products. Since we're talking about an international wholesale retailer, they had their presence in warehouses, in physical stores, on commercial websites, or even cash on delivery. So wherever the customer would be, the company wanted to be able to recommend the best price for the customers that also brings in profit back into the business.
Right, Anjuna. So this particular problem had two perspectives. One is the data science to come up with an algorithm that can address the Sally's problem statement to predict the product prices by using a historical data and some analysis. So I can say that data science is something that will provide a meaningful information based on some large amount of complex data. Uh, the another perspective to solve this problem is the data engineering that will collect the product specific data from different sources and transform it as per the requirement for further processing, or store the transformed data in some storage for the data science to make use of it.
So if I were to really translate all of that Sally and her businesses was asking from us visually, it would look something like this. What they're expecting at the end are prices that are optimized for profit. That would be perhaps residing somewhere to be consumed and then exported to different kind of systems. But in order to do that, the prices will have to undergo some sort of data science magic where uh, the intelligence can separate the seasonal and non-seasonal products. So by seasonal products, we mean products that are only in market or on sale during particular season. A good example would be that of Christmas time sales. But because we are considering a major amount of major chunk of the product database of this company, we will be going with the non-seasonal products. So there would be some separation made in terms of what products we are choosing, and then some sort of demand-based pricing applied to it. So whenever the pricing would be considered, it would also be considered what was the demand of that product. And in the end, we would get a recommended price based on profit optimization. But in order for the data science to be able to do these things, it would need its inputs to come from several different input resources. So since we are dealing with the prices here and the end product is going to be optimized prices, we would certainly need the sales data of these products. We would also need data from the POS terminals, the point of sale terminals in stores or even online. We would also consider discount prices for some of those products or promotional prices, and some external factors like we discussed earlier that Sally would refer to the competitors' prices as well for those products. And what the customer had done was they had hired external agencies who would do this research to get data from competitor stores for those products. So those were available in the form of events, and that will also be considered as one of the inputs. Once we have all of these inputs ready, we would then ingest all of these product prices and their sales and other information like invoices data too, and then aggregate those prices across different stores for the same product, and also aggregate the sales on weekly basis. We're coming up with this aggregation over here because in this problem particularly, it was a requirement from the data scientists that the prices that do come to them have to be an aggregate of prices for that product across different stores and also an aggregate on weekly basis. Then we would check if all these prices have valid values. They're not null, they're not negative. And we would also not consider the return sales, which means that when we're considering all the sales data for a particular product, if there was a refund generated or a return sale created, we would not consider prices or a record like that. For all of these stages to do their job and all of these steps to be orchestrated and run timely and communicate with each other, we would need some sort of workflow management tool, and this aspect of the whole addressing of the problem, we would refer to that as data workflow.
Right. So what you are saying, we have translated the problem statement into the data architecture to solve the Sally's problem, right? So
That's
now
right.
we will try to map those with the data terminologies. So first we identified all the data source as input, following which we ingest it to the system, having some quality checks on it. Then we will move with applying some data transformation rules on ingested data, so that we will have only let's say data that we need. So as you mentioned earlier, we need some historical data, right? So we will do that here, so that the transform data is available for my algorithm to consume. Finally, we will get some expected results. In our case, these expected results are price predictions that we can publish or have stored them somewhere, so that we can export the outputs to the pricing systems.
That's right. So if I were to simplify this complexity that we see here, it would look something like this in a data workflow pipeline, where we have several data inputs and all the stages that we would have performed on the data, and all the steps that we would need for our algorithm, and the follow-up steps on publishing and making that information available for the output systems.
Right. With that said, the way a story would move in a usual non-data agile projects would fairly differ on the data projects, such as this one here as an example of usual non-data project story lifecycle. We generally start with the iteration planning meeting. So we call it as IPM, where business analyst, developer, and tester will sit together to discuss the scoping and analysis of the stories to be covered in that particular sprint. Once the IPM is done, the team will continue with the story kickoffs, where developer and tester will discuss on the functional and technical aspects of those stories, right? Once this is done, the developer will start to construct the actual business logic, right? Followed by a desk check happen, where a developer will showcase and the developed functionalities to check with some challenging or positive checks with BAs and testers, following by a QAs then take the responsibility to check if the functionality is built with proper checks. Upon that, QAs will have a showcase to show the functionality working to the stakeholders, so that we can provide a sign off on that functionality to promote it to the next stage. Now let's see how this fits in our data project with a problem statement like ours. So let's now consider a specific story from our problem statement. So we earlier said that we need some historical data, where we will consume a historical product prices to predict optimum price. With this said, here comes some pain points. Since the scope of the story is so vast, its analysis and scoping become tricky. Since it may happen, we could spill some coverage to the next life cycles. Since we are only consuming the historical data, so the desk check here done by the developer will only include showing how they have consumed the specific data. But what we actually do in a regular desk check is validating some more checks on a logic, right? So that we can find issues early in the life cycle. So in case of data test check, it is humanly impossible to check different data variation and its inputs, because it will consume a lots of time. The next pain point would be providing a sign off from the perspective of data scientists. And since we are only consuming the historical data, deployment of this particular functionality may not add much value to go into the next phase. Right. So with data projects, we see certain practice changes on day-to-day life product cycles. So if you can remember the previous pain points we talked about, we will try to map some data engineering analogies instead. So as mentioned in this slide here, for data engineering, first we do a data mapping, right? Where we identify the data sources and the required data to be collected from those particular sources. In our case, it will be a historical pricing of the products. Once we identify all the data sources and required data, the next stage is the data modeling. which generally focuses on how we do structure and store data in for our use cases. Then we try to acquire that data from for that particular data, and we will have some checks on the data quality perspective. Afterward, we will transform the acquired data to extract the required attributes, say product information and prices in our case. And we will validate the transformed data if it is ready to go for the next phase.
Right. And similarly for a data science story lifecycle too, if we were to go by the commonly adopted agile story lifecycle, we would face similar challenges. From our problem statement, if we consider a story, a data science story that is analyzing a demand and price relationship, and this was actually one of the key requirements to approach the problem, because the recommendations that had to be generated had to be influenced by the demand of those products as well. So in order to start with developing or even modeling what that algorithm could look like, there had to be a lot of analysis performed between demand and price of those products. And in order to do this, that analysis and scoping was quite challenging, because how would you even scope a story like this? There was huge amount of data involved. We did not know what the outcome would look like, even though in development there might have been some baby steps taken, but not necessarily an outcome that could have been that could have some sort of quality check also done on it. Because in the end, the result was more of the analysis and how to take the next steps. There wasn't any concrete outcome that would have been showcaseable to the customers, or even to get some sort of sign off from the customers, and let alone the deployment aspect, because it's not even a valuable piece in its own to be deployed into production just yet. So given all of these challenges, it also became very difficult to establish a very trusting relationship with the customers. There was quite a bit of uncertainty involved. There was quite a bit of concern on when will we have a good, valuable piece in hand? When can we actually see the algorithm working? How do we know the prices are actually going to be right for the customers? All of these questions had started to become quite a bit of a concern. And this was particularly because when we look at data science stages, what actually happens in the sprint is this. The data scientists take up some amount of literature review to understand what approaches they can take to address this problem, and then do some analysis on the data that they have, and perhaps come up with one or two zeroed down or shortlisted models of algorithm to try and test out with. And then the results that come out of those, they do an analysis on it. And at some point, we were getting involved as QAs to help them get some confidence or do some sort of validation that they were expecting on those results. And then we were also doing sign off on those results with subject matter experts of the business. And in the end, that piece of work was deployable. And over here, the deployment takes a very different definition to a regular non-data story deployment, which is in production and functioning. Over here, the deployment would mostly mean that that first round of iterating the data through a particular model or version of algorithm gives enough confidence for us to try that out in the whole data engineering facilitation, where we can pass this data and perform some sort of transformations and other checks and have the algorithm do its job and give us results which we can again evaluate and take it up for the next sprint. So this does not necessarily fit into the very precise agile story lifecycle that we've seen on non-data projects. And in the end, on retrospection, we were realizing that we don't really follow the same steps. For us, things differ. And we, even though some of the terminologies could be same, we are doing things very differently. Now, As I called out in my previous slide, that there was some bit of discomfort creeping in with the stakeholders. We were not able to have a very concrete conversations around how much of it is ready, when can we deliver, what does it look like, where have we reached, how much progress is made. All of these important questions were very difficult to communicate. And that is where we realized that as QAs, we had to step up a bit and move away from our traditional ways of performing testing or doing quality analysis on these stories in one sprint. Usually in a non-data project, we would expect the story to be completed in the development and then come for QAing and then perform QA on a working functionality. But in data science, it was quite difficult to keep ourselves at arm's length of the system and wait for things to all be working out and then get into it. Over here, we instead had to get into the system and work hand in hand with the data engineers and data scientists and perform QA specific activities on every stage of that data pipeline that we just discussed earlier. So from here on, let's look at those QA specific activities that we were able to do to address the problem statement.
Right. So going back to the data pipeline, this is what a data architecture for data pipeline commonly looks. We can now look into specific QA activities around each stage. So if you can remember, the first part of the data pipeline is consuming the data from different sources. Now let's discuss how QA activities can be around this stage. So first thing we need a continuous stream of events like sales transaction from the point of sales terminals of different stores, the historical product prices from the production pricing database, or sometimes the competitor data from the external agencies. We also ensure that all the inputs are latest as they are on the production, because this helps algorithm to analyze the valid data. Since we must test using the different sets of data, because this is the common practice that we follow in our regular QA activities as well. And because as the algorithm is also going to need different types of pricing as input, we ensure that all these prices are available from their respective sources. Let's take an example of files, some files, okay? The next thing, we also ensure that all the mandatory attributes are present for the source data. This is the most important fact, because in our case, it can be a selling price of the products or the discount price of the products. Then if we can recall, the next phase in the data pipeline is ingesting data to the system. With that said, we validated if product and their respective prices, which we consume, are stored in the correct underlying storage locations. So when I say correct underlying storage location, this can be a HDFS, Hadoop distributed file system, or can be any storage bucket like S3 or GCP for that matter. If we can recall, we need only historical data, right? So if we can take an example of, let's say, 5 years. So from the input sources, we also ensure that we are ingesting data within that specific time period only, rather than considering all of the historical data. The next stage in the data pipeline is to check the data quality of the ingested data in the previous step. Once I have the data into my system, we ensure that the data integrity, this is the most important part. In our case, we have compared the product and their prices with the source data that we have ingested. We also validated that all the products have the valid prices and the data is pushed to correct storage location. For example, no negative selling prices or no null or blank values we have in our storage. We also check for the duplicate or missing product information, because this could impact the outcome of our algorithm intelligence. Yeah, so this is the most crucial step in our data pipeline, is the data transformation on the ingested data. So till last stage, we just validated the data quality of data that we ingested from the source. Data transformation on a high level means extracting out some necessary attributes from the data set, since we might not interested in all of that ingested data. In our case, it can be a product and their prices. So we ensured that transform data met my algorithm requirements. For example, the aggregate prices of the products across the different stores, or the aggregate sales product on weekly basis. Once that is done, we validated there is no corrupt data into my system. After the transformation, we also verified the data integrity check to verify after the transform my data is intact. I can give one example here. So let's say we have ingested data of X products, right, from the source, and then we transform those X product prices, and at the end we should get the X transform product prices. It should not deviate from X, right? It cannot be X minus 1, or it cannot either be X plus 1, something like that. Sorry. Then we also validated that my data is ready for the next stage to be consumed by the algorithms.
Right. So when moving into the data science aspect of this pipeline, in order for the algorithm to start consuming the data, there must be some preparation required for this. So the first things that we would verify that all of the transformed data is available in the format expected by the algorithm. In the problem that we had, all of this data was moving across in Avro format, but the algorithm was expecting a CSV. So ensuring that the data is converted into that format, and also the data modeling parameters are available. There were different parameters that the data scientists had defined for the algorithm to be effective. And these parameters were predefined as part of the offline flow, where they would also look at the training data and derive some parameters out of it and make them available for this online flow that we're talking about, which can be consumed for the algorithm. Checks were also made to ensure that all the outliers are removed. Now, a good example of an outlier here would be that there is a price for a particular product, which in its history of 5 years, at some point has been way off the mark from what its other prices looked like over that time period. And this could happen as a result of the sales manager of some store had really good relationship with this customer, and she just decided to provide very heavy discount for her favorite customer. And that price reflected in the system as way off the mark than all the other regular prices for that product. So that would be an outlier. And usually in data algorithm context, such outliers kind of interfere with the output, and the expectation of data scientists was from the research they had done that we will not consider these kind of outliers, and the data had to be prepared to remove them. There were also validations we made on the mean deviations are within threshold for each product. So all of these mean deviation thresholds were also predefined, and the data scientists communicated with us that this is a threshold. So if we see any of the mean deviation value that is coming outside of this threshold, that is the data that will not be considered for the algorithm. These insights we as QAs got mostly by collaborating with data scientists and understanding the needs of their algorithm and what their model expects for the data to be in what shape. The next step would be of the algorithm execution itself, and ensuring that all the preconditions for this algorithm are met. Failing preconditions also fails the algorithm. This will obviously differ with a different context on different data projects, but for this particular problem, the algorithm expected all of these preconditions as mandatorily passing before it could even execute. And if the algorithm failed, the next stages also do not execute, and respective calls to actions are triggered. So for example, if a stage fails, then where is it that the alerting should go? what information do we need in those kind of logs. All of this also were verified. And then if the algorithm execution was successful, then all the post stages of the algorithm are also executed successfully. To the last step where the outputs would be available, there was very different kind of testing performed, again, with the help of the insights from data scientists on this one. So on the results, there would be some expectation of algorithm error, but this expectation would also be in a particular range. And this range is pre-communicated that no algorithm is ever going to spit out 100% accurate value that is going to give a confidence of 100% also. So if any particular value falls in a particular range, that will be permissible. So when testing, please ignore those values which are in the permitted range and raise alerts on values which are not. We also validated if the output results are available in the expected consumable format. So when these prices were published and sitting at the storage locations, they were in particular formats because of the earlier problem statement that we called out, where this information had to be consumed by different stakeholders, including Sally, who herself wanted the same information in different formats. And then verifying if outputs are available as inputs to the next execution. As part of the algorithm outputs, some of these files would be then consumed as inputs for the consecutive algorithm runs. This is mainly because, if you remember, we are considering with historical data here, any output that comes out of this execution will go and append itself to that historical data. And if there was any error in the output, that would also go and sit as input for the next run, so that the predictions can be made more efficient in consecutive runs. I can give an example over here. So if the algorithm was if one of the results, say, was expected to be that this particular product is going to make 500 sales at a price of, say, ₹100. Now, when that was actually implemented in the stores, when the prices were put up, say only 490 products were sold, and then there was an error of 10 products. This information will be fed back as input, so that with more and more consecutive runs, the data scientists would be able to evaluate and analyze if the algorithm is giving more confidence with more runs and more information of this historic data. Apart from the data workflow, there were also other data storage checks that were performed regularly at respective stages. So for example, when we talked about data transformation, all of this transfer data had to be available at a particular location for the algorithm to start picking it up for data preparation. So ensuring that they are stored, and as a result of their storage, no corrupt data is entering. And data integrity is also maintained with all the upstream data sources. And all of the metadata required for that stage is also generated. So if the data was coming from the data transformation stage, then we have enough and adequate information on how all of these records come to be in the storage, at what time were they stored, how many number of products are we looking at here, are there any issues or errors, what is that number. All of this information was also catered for so that we can debug easily if we see any problems coming up in the latter stages. Then the exporting and publishing aspect, once the recommended prices were available, ensuring that, so it was not the only file that was generated as a result of algorithm execution. There were several other files. Like I said, some of them would also go and sit as inputs for the next run, and some of them would be purely prices recommended at their optimized profit. And there were several others which the data scientists themselves used to evaluate the performance of their algorithm, or that version of algorithm that was just run. And then all of these files to be used as inputs also are available in those particular locations. And validating if the data visualization is also as per transform data attributes. What we mean over here is when all of this data is sitting in their storages, some of these were also used to be represented as charts or graphs to demonstrate what trends are we seeing in the recommendations. Where are the price points coming up? Where are the data points coming up? And all the attributes that were expected to be shown in those visualization charts or graphs are present. So making those checks was also crucial. From workflow management perspective, there were lots of verifications done on how the jobs are scheduled, the timing of these jobs. There was this specific requirement for all of these jobs to be run only in the night so that the customers can have the data ready by morning, and the price analyst, Sally, can review them and also push them to the stores if she approves them, and there is no delay in getting those profits from these recommended prices. Some sort of verification on when the job was completed, and also availability of all of these prices in their respective locations so that they can be consumed for the next stages.
Correct. So apart from the stages we mentioned in the data pipeline earlier, we feel that there could be some more validation checks we can apply to further test our pipeline, right? One of that was validating how my pipeline behaves when it encounters huge amount of data. We validated for this case if my system is able to consume this huge amount of data efficiently or not. The next thing we validated is are my message queues are getting cleared on time, because there should not be overlap between two subsequent jobs, right, who will consume that data. The third thing we validated is if we are encountering a huge amount of data, there should be an underlying storage system capable of handling such data, right? We talk about this in the previous slides. Then if my and is same getting transformed, right, because we are also talking about the transformation of stored data. So when we encountered a huge data, my system should be capable of transforming that data by applying some transformation rules efficiently. We also ensured the memory and resource utilization for our jobs. So as Anjuman mentioned earlier, we also verify some job completion. So we, along with that, we also verify the memory and resource utilization of such jobs when they're handling some huge amount of data. And if there is any pain point in visualizing it, so a visualization can be a chart or a bar chart or a graph where we are saying the price prediction is sometimes higher or sometimes lower, something like that. Apart from that, one more form of testing that we do is recovery test for our job. So let's say by anyhow, if any of the job is failing, how my system is able to recover that job from the failures. Is my system is capable enough to recover that job from the failures. So once my job is recovered, how it is able to consume the data that is coming in after its recovery. We also ensure the node failure scenarios, because since we are dealing with distributed node systems, we also make sure that if any of the node fails, my other node should also take my other node should also share the loads of them, right? The next important aspect that we covered is logging mechanism, because this is very helpful when we want to debug some failure reasons for my jobs. So health of the environment. So this is not that we tested for each iteration. We can test this with several or some time intervals, like checking the storage capacity of my environments or clusters availability with the distributed nodes or the test data availability on my test environment. So just to summarize the QA activities that we talked about, they are not as same as the traditional activities that we follow in the normal projects, right? Because we are dealing with some different tendency of the projects who handle only the data, and UI may not involve in such kind of projects, but the approach for the testing remains the same, and that approach will be challenge the business logic to make it more robust and one that can give us the confidence. So these QA activities that we talked may differ from some other data projects as well.
Yeah. So as a result, even though with all the challenges that we faced earlier and also on the way of testing these stages, there were certainly some learnings too. We have taken some of these key challenges and learnings to present. With the challenges, I think something that we experienced was that definitely there are some sort of skills required to test data storage systems like the Hadoop distributed file system or Google Cloud platform that we were using to kind of solve this problem. Initially, we had to refer to some documentation and get some community support, but it did feel tricky on how the data workflow actually fits into the whole big picture and how do we go about even testing and getting confidence out of these systems. Definitely end-to-end automation on such data pipelines was really difficult to achieve. We did have several conversations to sit down and understand if we were to crack this problem, how could we go about that? But we also had constraints on delivery timelines. So this was not an easy one or straightforward one to tackle, especially when both aspects, data engineering as well as data science, are involved, and that too in one flow of the whole pipeline. So this was one of the challenging things, and hence the automation tool selection could also be difficult because there was very little UI or no UI at all that we were dealing with here. And most automation tools that we have available in the market respond to the UI test needs more than the data project needs. And I think the industry also acknowledges that this is a very this is at a very evolving stage, and we may have to still wait to see some common or popular tools being made available. Having said that, that does not stop us from creating our own scripts and being able to test maybe several aspects of the whole pipeline. But that also proved challenging. If more time we had, then maybe that was something that we could have explored. There were also a lot of efforts generated to get data from different sources and also to verify if they are the right sources, especially in this case. There were several different data residing in very different clusters and also coming from very different input sources. And they had different timelines to even get updated to resemble how data looks like in production. So what we had to do was actually have some sort of job and mechanisms outside of the whole data pipeline flow to get them from all different sources and have them in one place, and then our data workflow starts pulling from there. So these were some key challenges. There were several others, some we already covered when it came to the agile aspect, but something that we thought were more prominent. In terms of learnings, Pranish, do you want to go?
Right. So we have certain learnings or something that worked for us. So first thing is data integrity or some crucial attributes of it. As we earlier speak about the problem statement that we need some historical data, right? So we might not be interested in all of it. We need certain data within a time gap, let's say 5 years. Among that 5 years data, we are also interested in the products and their selling prices. So preciseness and the integrity are the crucial attributes of data which we are going to ingest or which we are going to consume or which we are going to transform as part of our pipeline.
Yeah, and also the QA is not always on the end result. That was a very key learning for me specifically because being on other non-data projects, it was quite easy for me to say that, okay, that's okay. I don't know what's going on in here, but when I give this input, I want to be able to see this as the result. But when it came to these projects, it was particularly challenging to even keep that demand with the data engineers and data scientists because the pain was out there. It was not possible to just wait for the end result and do my thing. Hence, a different approach and a different strategy to actually get on board and do it all together. And that was a very different way of testing or quality analysis that I have done in all of my projects.
Correct. Talking about the scope management, as Anjuman already mentioned something like we need to collaborate with developers for this. So and about the scope management, we already discussed that this is the pain point when we are talking about the data project. So what we have learned about is if we can take a baby steps, or we can bring in any story or any problem statement into some smaller chunks, then it will be achievable instead of achieving it as a whole. If we can achieve it in a bits and pieces, it will be a great approach.
Yeah, just to add to that also, despite the fact that we had a number of iteration planning meetings and scope management meetings to just see how we can really be able to get a valuable piece out and get the confidence from the customers itself, uh, was extremely challenging. One could also never ever estimate on the stories being picked up and when will we be able to deliver. So that was one of the things that we learned, that we should be able to take some other approaches to be able to manage the scope better. And when QAing, something that always stood at the forefront of all thought processes, all strategies, all testing approaches was the volume, variety, and velocity of all of this data. No matter how much ever I was inclined to go the traditional non-data project QA approaches and strategies, I would inadvertently be pulled to consider the volume and variety and the velocity of all of these data that is coming in and going out, and how often we want, and all the jobs running. So all of these aspects did shape the thinking of how we do quality analysis on data projects.
Correct. So next point is validating the outputs with SMS. Since we talked about a data pipeline where we have multiple stages, right? Where data is coming in, we are processing something on it, then we are passing to the next stage. We are generating outputs regularly at each stage. So validating those outputs and the final result with SMS helped a lot to be sure that we are on the right track and we are doing the things correctly.
Yeah, and it also bridged that gap of trust and uncertainty that was there in the initial sprints. And later on, we were able to get on board and deliver a solution that was giving the customers also confidence. And the data scientists also the space to keep evolving their algorithm to make it even more efficient. Last but not the least, good friendships with data scientists is very, very key. I think I learned great deals by working alongside them. This was a very major challenge because even though the project setup and the team setup was very agile, somehow there were these silos created when it came to solving this particular problem. And not because any of us wanted to, but mostly because our fields were so different from each other, yet so dependent on each other, that we were doing all of these pieces in silos. The data engineers are going about making the whole data workflow and standing up a platform. The data scientists are head deep into evolving the algorithm and finding ways to make it more efficient. There's time pressure, delivery pressure. And here, as a QA, I was getting more and more frustrated to crack how do we get the confidence? How do we help our customers trust us even more? So developing a rapport with them and coming up with more conversations, understanding what were their pain points, how can I as a QA enable them to do their job even better and get that confidence even in the algorithms that they were evolving. Every version had to give them some feedback. How can I be that person to give them feedback and make things available for them to even take the next steps? So that went a long way in the project. And in the end, I think as a team, we were able to do a great job, come up with that price recommendation system, which is also now live in several countries. So that was it, what we had to share from our experience. If there are any questions or comments.
So Anjuman, maybe you can use the question sheet and we can start answering questions from there.
Yes, just give me some time to open it.
So while Anjuman does that, there was a question on what are different kinds of charts, Pranesh?
Yeah. Yeah. So chart can be anything. So we can take a generic example here. Let's say we want to visualize something like if we have a application and in that application several user logs in, and what we need a data where whi- which will give us how many users just logs in, or how many of them completed their journey till end, or how many then got dropped off. So we can collect the data from the system and we can have some bar charts or some line graphs, or some graph showing how many users comes in, how many of them actually completed their journey, how many of them just got dropped off.
Yeah, there's one on, could you elaborate on the literature review? I can give it a try, but this is mostly very specific to data scientists. What I had observed them doing was whenever there was this problem statement that come in, there is a lot of literature out there to even come up with what models or what approaches or what methodologies can be used to develop a custom algorithm that would solve this kind of a problem. And that was mostly a pre-analysis stage that the data scientists did, and then came up with a proposal of this is what the plan looks like and this is how we can deliver. Sometimes during the analysis stage too, when they would start working on the data and understanding the requirements, they did go back and refer to the literature review. One of the very first outcomes of doing a literature review would be coming up with one or two methodologies that can be tried out to see which one can be adopted for best results, if that answers the question.
Yeah, maybe I can share an example and also the reason behind it. So if you look at data scientists, these profiles are mostly mathematicians or people who are dealing with numbers and data and correlations. And they are not really the subject matter experts in the domain that you're working in, or where your project is. So if, for example, the retail problem statement that we discussed, they would have a high level idea of how retail works, but to understand what are the forces, what are the pulls and pushes in a retail domain, and what industry has been following till now, they might look at literature, form certain hypotheses, and then using the current customers data or the current project data, they would like to validate or invalidate those hypotheses.
Yeah. So there is a next question, what tool was adopted for automation in this project? So I can say there is no barrier on using the automation tool. I can give one example. If you want to generate a data strategy, right, which we also talked about, generating a data from source, because this is a tedious activity, because we sometimes needs to create a huge amount of data. So if we use any UI automation tool, in this case, it will take a lots of time to just navigate through your application. So instead of any UI automation, if you can use any API automation tool or any performance automation tool where we will do API chaining, right? So what we are doing here is we are actually reducing the time to complete the journey. So let's say for let's say UI automation tool took around 10 minutes, and API automation tool just did it in 2 to 3 minutes. So something like that we can do. Also, so some other aspects would be reading or validating the data after transformation or after the ingestion, because as Anjuman says, we are storing the files in the Avro file format, which is not readable by the humans. So we can use some Spark shells over it to just to see the data that got transformed or the data that got ingested into the system.
Yeah. There's a question on how was the analysis and scoping done to earn the customer trust, plus to get the dev and QA on board and get them to agree. Well, for starters, we started with really acknowledging that there's something that is not fitting in altogether. And it might have been from the attempt to try and fit everything in the agile framework that we're used to following. But we acknowledged, we got into meetings and said that no, this is not working out, and there is supposed to be some confidence at the end of what you're doing, and we're not aware of it. So basically, we had conversations where we listed out all the pain points from all of the roles, from the data scientists as well, from data engineers, from the QAs, from the customers, the feedback that was coming to the project managers and to the team. We put all of these pain points on the chart and then started to address what looks like the quick win. One of the quick wins was like, let's first just admit that the way we're trying to fit this into a very typical non-data project agile story lifecycle, let's move away from that. And this is what we understand. And then we tried to communicate a lot with data scientists, and we had them do a lot of knowledge sharing sessions with the rest of the team so that we can develop that empathy on what roles are going through what challenges in coming up with the end result, and how then we can do our bit to facilitate that success outcome. I mean, I could go on and on about this really because it was a really long project too, and very later in the stage that we started to fix a lot of things. In the end, it does come down to acknowledging and then wanting to be able to deliver value, because if we're not doing as a team, that is surely going to lead us to frustrations and even impact the end results. Acknowledging that and coming together as a team to first try with the quick wins, and then shaping what our communication strategy would be with the customers. We also had data subject matter experts on our team. We roped them in a lot and shared all of these challenges with them, and they were able to articulate that in a language that the stakeholders could also understand. So we did have to come up with a communication strategy on what are the challenges we are facing, so that we could at the same time be honest, but also share that this does not look feasible to deliver in the timeline that you are saying, and these are the reasons why, and this is the plan to address them. If we hadn't communicated the plan, there wouldn't have been any way forward. So there were lots of aspects that did go in there, starting from the team to some responsible personalities in the team who would bridge that gap too. And as QAs, we were kind of at the center of giving that confidence at every iteration or outcome of the algorithm that was getting involved, and the results that were coming out of it.
Right. There is one more question. What is the language preferred for such projects? I can say there is no such language preference when you choose the automation tool, because I can see there are tools available with n number of or maximum number of language support. Also, there is a lot. Uh, there is more. I can say. How should I put this? There is availability of the support from them as well. So I guess there is no barrier as such on any language preference for such projects.
There is one last question over here. what is the usual sprint time period for data science projects and which stage is more time consuming? The second bit is easier to answer. I feel definitely reach for the data scientists to reach a point where the algorithm is in a shape that can give that confidence to them that it can now utilize the data and provide the expected results. Uh, that research and that analysis and getting that confidence is difficult. And also with the nature also of the way data scientists work, many times we had to, you know, tell them that I think there's never going to be the perfect outcome in the first one. So let's stop somewhere and let us start to just test it out. And unless, because they were also doing some of this analysis on their own machines, and they were comfortable that if this were to go in the workflow management, it would not give the results that were expected. So that was the first checkpoint anyway. And to arrive at a place where, yes, this is in a good shape for the data to be now consumed. That took a lot of time, but definitely the quality analysis stage 2 on that, to go through all of these different parameters that we discussed, all of the things that the algorithm would require to verify them, and then how they're able to make those outputs available. And when the outputs come, what are the things, because it was more important to find issues with the output of the algorithm than it was to keep checking what the expected outcomes were. And there were different tools that the data scientists themselves were also using to see the performance of the algorithm. So there was some aspect of quality that in the capacity of QAs that we were doing, there was some aspect that the data scientists themselves were doing. And we also were collaborating a lot with data engineers to kind of do the QAing of the performance of the workflow itself. So there were so many different aspects that we were touching, that that stage particularly stretched longer to get confidence as a team that yes, this can now be demonstrated or delivered to the customers and communicated about.
Maybe I can take the first part of the question. So it talks about how long does a usual sprint time period for a data science project look like. I think with our experience, what we have learned that it is not advised to measure or size the data science work as part of sprints, because most of this work is say experimental. So initially there is a lot of data analysis, there is a lot of hypothesis validation that the data scientists would do. And usually it is also difficult for data scientists themselves to say that how much time would be needed, because there is a lot of theory that needs to be proved or disproved with the data available at hand. So what has really worked for us and our learnings has been is to not really bound them by sprint, because then they are definitely going to go into spillovers, and that is going to again shake that confidence that you're trying to build with the client. So our learning has been to really measure them as number of days, which is against the agile philosophy, but it has usually worked. And then also to communicate a clear plan to the client, saying that we are going to run these experiments, let's say 1 2 3 4 5. We are going to make these experiments time boxed, so we'll probably invest 1 or 2 weeks on each experiment, and we would be able to eventually come up with which experiment we are following through for our algorithm development at the end of this exercise. Any more questions? Cool. I think we are good. Although we are open, and Anjuman and Pranesh would be available throughout the Geek Night. So you can keep posting your questions here, just tag them separately because we'll be on our second talk. The plan now is to have a 10-minute break.